I've been thinking about this. How many armies on the face of the earth have been trained not to kill civilians? As a matter of fact, has our army been trained not to kill civilians? I'm just curious because I don't know how many civilians died in Afghanistan. Our media wasn't keeping count of that. I don't know how many civilians died in the Korean War, in the Vietnam War. I just don't know. I don't think Churchill gave a damn about how many civilians died when he was trying to defend his country. I know Franklin Roosevelt didn't give a damn, and I sure know Harry Truman didn't give a damn. And so it's very strange. We have a country in Israel that is the only country with a military, to my knowledge, that is trained not to kill civilians. And they're up against an enemy that is trained to kill civilians, both their own Palestinians and Israelis. So I sit here as an observer of the corrupt, pathetic American media, question after question, right out of the box, every single time. Mr. Prime Minister, what are you going to do about the civilians? So, Mr. Prime Minister, I want to welcome you to the program, and I want to ask you a different question. How is the war progressing, and is Israel winning?
The war is progressing well, and we're going to win. We have no other choice. It's going well because we put our forces on the ground, and coincidentally, actually, there are fewer civilian casualties because we called on the civilian population in Gaza to leave. Hamas tried to stop them at gunpoint, actually using gunfire to prevent them from leaving the zones of battle, but they left. And so the number of civilians is actually, those that are killed is going down. The number of terrorists is going up. We're destroying their infrastructure, their command posts, their rockets, their underground tunnels, and we're going to win because we have to win. This is a battle of the forces of civilization against the forces of barbarism. And if barbarism wins in our part of the world, Europe will be next, and America will be next, because the axis of terror of Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and their other minions will imperil the Middle East and then spread their barbarism to the entire world. Israel is fighting our war, but it's also fighting America's war. It's fighting your war, and our victory will be your victory.
You know, Mr. Prime Minister, people have very short memories. We went to war in Afghanistan to fight the same Islamist ideology after our people were slaughtered in New York in the Twin Towers. And we've been attacked scores of times before that by the same Islamist ideology, maybe carrying a different flag, it doesn't much matter, trying to create these caliphates all over the world. They're not really interested in having one state. That's obvious with Hamas. You turned over the Gaza Strip to the Palestinians, and it turned into a terror state. Obviously, you know what's going on in Judea and Samaria now, how that area is being increasingly terrorized by the same ideology and the same individuals. I just wondered, sometimes when you're by yourself and you're thinking about this, and you have to talk to the press, because the battle of ideas and the battle of the press goes on and on and on. And Israel's been through this many times. At the very beginning, Israel supported, and then so much of the world turns on Israel. Sometimes do you say to yourself, what the hell is going on in this world? It's turned inside out. Don't the Western democracies give a damn about what's taking place here?
I think a lot of people do, and in America there's a strong backing of public opinion that basically understands that Israel is on the forces of good against the forces of evil. And I saw this massive rally a few days ago in Washington of Jews and non-Jews standing together, shoulder to shoulder, because they understand that. But yes, there is that frustration because we're attacked by Hamas. They storm into our communities, rape and murder women, burn babies, behead people, take hostages, babies, children, elderly, murder children in front of their parents, parents in front of their children. No wonder the German chancellor came here and he said, these are the new Nazis. So what did you do with the original Nazis? Hitler invades Europe, commits the worst savagery. He does the Holocaust on the Jews. The Allies fight back. They invade Normandy. They go through the cities of France and the cities of Germany. The German army places itself in the cities, in civilian neighborhoods, in hospitals, in schools, everywhere. And of course, the Allies fight. They target the German army, But there are also civilian casualties, a lot of them. Now, you know, what would have happened to history if at that point public opinion would say, in the democracies, oh God, what are you doing to the Nazis? What are you doing to the German population? That's not what they asked. They said what you said. How's the war progressing? History would have been catastrophic if we didn't keep our eye focused on who's to blame. Who was to blame? Who was to blame for these civilian casualties? The Allies or the Nazis? And now in many quarters in the democracies, they're saying Israel is to blame. The Allies are to blame, not the axis of terror, but the Allies for peace and for prosperity and for modernity against these barbarians who want to take us back to the Middle Ages, early Middle Ages, may I say. So we have to, this is a sign of moral bankruptcy. It's a sign of moral obfuscation. It's a sign of deep confusion at best. And we have to get the simple things straight. While Israel is doing everything in its power to keep civilians out of harm's way, Hamas is doing everything in its power to keep civilians in harm's way. Israel provides humanitarian safe zones, humanitarian quarters. Hamas prevents Gaza civilians from leaving the war zones. So it's not Hamas, it's not Israel, but Hamas that is responsible for what it's doing. It's using the civilian population as human shields. It is deliberately targeting and murdering civilians and deliberately hiding behind civilians. That's a double war crime. They're the ones responsible. They should be held blame and they should be held accountable, not Israel. Israel is fighting the just war, the right war of the democracies against the barbarians.
You've spent most of your life as prime minister, as a cabinet member, as a party leader, as a scholar, warning about the terrorists, warning about the ideology, warning about Iran. It came to really a pinnacle when you came to the United States during the Obama administration and spoke to the entire Congress, the entire world, every American. And you said, Iran must not get a nuclear weapon. Now, it seems to me if you're concerned about citizens, innocent people, about babies in hospitals, you're concerned about all those things, which we are, then you will do everything humanly possible to ensure that Iran does not get a nuclear weapon. So my question to you, sir, is this. To the best of your knowledge, what exactly is being done to try and prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, to your knowledge?
Well, I'm not going to say everything in my knowledge, but I can say this, Mark, that the jury is still out. I mean, if we see what the Iranian axis is doing without nuclear weapons, the horrors it perpetrated on that October 7th, the wanton terrorism that is practicing not only in the Middle East, but in every continent around the world, including in North America and in South America. The terrible aggression that is perpetrating in every single zone in the world, and especially in our region. That's what it's doing without nuclear weapons. Now imagine what would happen if Iran had nuclear weapons and all its minions, all its proxies would know that they have a nuclear umbrella. It would be a different world and the entire world would be endangered. And of course, if Iran had nuclear weapons, they'd be able to use not only terrorist proxies, they'd be able to wield on you the threat of the greatest terror of them all, nuclear terrorism. They'd have ballistic missiles that could reach any city in the United States, and they'll hold you hostage. And therefore, the battle now that we're waging is a battle against Iran's axis of terror. And everybody wants to see who's going to win. If Israel wins, we all win. And if Israel doesn't win, then the axis emerges victorious. And that imperils our entire future. So this is not just Israel's war, it's your war. And we have to win this war, just as we had to win the battle against the Nazis. We had to win the battle against ISIS. We had to win the battle against Al-Qaeda. Everybody united, they understood. We cannot let this be obfuscated by Hamas propaganda and media obfuscation. We have to keep our moral clarity and our strategic clarity. We have to understand that we're fighting for our future. By the way, the future of the Palestinians as well as Israelis, the future of the Middle East, the future of the moderate Arab states, the future of the expansion of the historic Abraham Accords, a future of peace with Saudi Arabia. That can all be achieved, but it has one necessary prerequisite: victory, total victory over Hamas. We destroy Hamas, we assure the peace. We destroy Hamas, we assure security. We destroy Hamas, we assure a better future for all.
And honestly, this is what statesmen and real leaders, especially at wartime, believe. Lincoln, Churchill, Washington, many of your greatest leaders in the past in Israel and so forth. When you're at war, and a war like this is a war to the end. There's a winner and there's a loser. And I'm just concerned people don't understand that.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.